why would I be anything else when I could be me? No, but seriously, like, I could just do me, Like, I could just live my life as me. Just whole, complete, just myself. Unabridged.
And welcome to this week's episode of Unabridged. I am your host, Danielle, and this is episode 16. I am so excited for this week's episode. I know y'all saw the title and probably was like, what are we going to be talking about? But I promise you it's going to be super informative. Danielle is going to be an incredible guest, probably one of my favorite guests so far. Probably say that about all my guests, but I think it's going to be an incredible episode for you all, extremely informative. But before we get into our Unabridged journey for the week, we definitely have to get into your favorite segment, my favorite segment. Let's get into it.
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 That's right. Let's get right into it. We got a lot to talk about because so much has been going on. And usually, I try to hit the state or the feds, and not to say that a lot isn't going on with them. Some article came out about Josh Shapiro just spending all his bread on these private flights. Trump may get sent to jail because he can't shut his goddamn mouth. There's a lot going on in all these different levels of government, right? But Philly has a lot going on too. We are in a massive transition of powers, and we are seeing and feeling that the relationship shifts, and it is coming through this budget cycle. Now, a couple weeks ago, I talked about in a Let's Get Into It segment that the Philadelphia City Council is in the midst of their budget process, which means that the mayor presents her budget, council kind of picks it apart, asks questions through hearings, they go into negotiations, and then a bill is passed that sets the budget for how we will spend your tax dollars, my tax dollars, in the fiscal year of 24-25. Right? So that is the process we're in right now. So the point we're in right now is that members have officially asked all their questions of the administration. We are over with that, right? And now we're going into full negotiations with the mayor's administration. And I think some of the key things that really stuck out during this budget process was, number one, a lot of the questions were not answered. And I think that you have to give the Parker administration slack, because at the end of the day, they started this process less than 100 days of being in office, right? And that's a massive task, right? They had to hire, they had to transition over hundreds of positions, heads of departments, and that was a lot, right? That would be a lot for anybody, whether or not you're in government. And then they were immediately tasked with figuring out and presenting to council how they plan on spending our $5 billion budget. So that's a massive task, right? But one thing that I wish the Parker administration had done more of was really just acknowledging that they had inherited something that was, in a really shitty position. And no one ever wants to throw their previous colleague under the bus. It's hard to be the mayor, but we all knew what happened, right? We were all there. The mayor was in council, and the mayor knows she would have read that man was reading that man for filth, right? So at the end of the day, we know, where they kind of started this process, right? So I think that was kind of like the give and take that you saw, was that members were really going hard on topics that you saw, like, for example, the Office of Homeless Services. Oh, they got it so bad. They went ham on the Office of Homeless Services. And you really can't blame the council members for that, because housing and the way that we treat our unhoused population in the city of Philadelphia is deplorable, right? We have seen so many massive fights around encampments and where people live and around affordable housing because of how bad our housing situation is in the city of Philadelphia. So what can you do? So you have to kind of use this platform to get to the answers, because as council members, they don't really push any buttons. They only have the power of the bully pulpit. So you know what that means? That they can only talk, use hearings, ask questions to really highlight some of the discrepancies. But the mayor administration, which in this case is the executive, is the one that has the power, right? So that is the point of this budget process. That is what we call, or our way of checks and balances. So we are in the midst of that. So, some of the questions not being answered was definitely a theme. I think, we heard a lot about cleaner, greener, that whole One Philadelphia. That was something that was really pushed out there. And I think, the Parker administration laid out what some of their priorities are going to be. And I think that was very important at this time. It was really their first introduction to the council members. And, we have a long 4 years ahead of us. Well, like 3.5 years at this point ahead of us to see, how they're really going to, make their goals come to fruition. So the budget has been crazy. It is usually supposed to be passed before the end of June because of the way of our fiscal calendar. And if it is not passed by that point, that means members stop getting paid. So they make sure that budget is passed, okay? So, and then after that, we go into likely what they call the mid-year transfer, but that doesn't start until around October, which is another budget process. But again, we are in the main budget process right now. And the next, let's get into it, or maybe the second to last, I'll be able to kind of report, how some people fared and what we can expect to see from the city of Philadelphia in the next couple of months based on where money has been decided to be spent. School board fight. Yes. So amidst this budget process, there was also the process of selecting the new school board. Now, in Philadelphia is one of the only counties in Pennsylvania that does not have an elected school board, and that each member of the school board is fully appointed by the mayor. Now, the process goes that they formulate a selection committee. The selection committee submits around 20-something odd names, and then the mayor and her team pick 9 from that batch. The mayor administration, they did what they needed to do, put together a selection committee. They got their 27, they picked their 9. Now, what some of the discrepancy was that four previous board members from the previous school board were reselected again. And that kind of caused a little bit of issue and pushback between the chair of education and other members of the education committee, as well as along with the Parker administration. So they had a really crazy back and forth, during this time that caused a lot of outside advocacy from some people said charter organizations or just, members who have been advocating for school issues for decades. You had a lot of people who were kind of standing up for these members and talked a lot about their work within the schools. But this is kind of one of the main or first points that we've ever seen of dissension between the Parker admin and city council. And it was a major fight because, some people's argument was that, council should not be allowed to push back on who the mayor wants to be her school board, right? Like it's her job to solve these issues. So she has to be able to pick her tools. But on the other hand, council members were asking for members who were able to be more collaborative, right? They were concerned, saying that, sometimes institutional knowledge is not more important when our schools are in the state that they are in. Right? We can't call on wanting and needing that institutional knowledge when that institutional knowledge has gotten us to this point where our schools are being shut down every day due to facilities, due to teacher closings, due to it being too hot, right? So it's like, what is this old model that we're really trying to get back to? What are we trying to protect here? So I think that was, again, one of the main dissensions. Now, what ended up happening, again, which made it really spicy, was that, 8 out of the 9 members that were selected by the mayor's team went through. One member Joyce Wilkerson, was not. However, even though she was not sworn in by council, the mayor's administration somehow asked them to allow Joyce to continue to serve until a new board member was selected. They received an opinion from the law department that said that was completely legal. And the thing is that they don't have a timeline, though, for when they actually have to pick this 9th board member. So there's not really an ending date for when they expect for Ms. Wilkerson to step off the board. Like I said, it's been a spicy week. Right? And I think that, there was a lot of back and forth that went on for the first time between this administration, between the council president's office, between the council as a whole. And it was really telling to see, how this body and how this administration is going to be able to handle when they are not seeing eye to eye, which is going to happen on a regular basis. # checks and balances. That is the realities of what our system is about. And I think it was really fun to watch and to see the way that this unfolded, because I think in the beginning, everybody has their honeymoon phase and we're all, we love each other and yes, and we love you and we're so excited. But then it's just like, no, we are in the real work of changing people's lives. We are in the real work of making sure that citizens have better quality of life. And when you get to that point, when you start getting into real shit, that's when it's no more the honeymoon phase. That's when it gets down into how are we actually going to spend this money? Because government at its core is the allocation of scarce resources. I got that from Isaiah. I'm not going to even take that one. I'm not even going to take that bar. But that is what it is. And when you put those, and where you put those scarce resources, is where you show what you care about. And that is why this process is so important. That's why the school board process is so important. That's why the budget process is so important. And that's why I kind of want to come on here and spend some time talking about this week, because, they don't make it easy for people in the community to really get involved in this. Now, shout out to the council president's office, because they had, in-person meetings with people and met in communities. And I think that was really dope, because it was like, you don't only have to come to city council during the day to get your opinion out, right? We're going to come right to your community. But at the same time, that is still not the easiest process to be a part of. So that is my role. And that was the budget process and the school board. Like I said, it's been a ratchet week for the city of Philadelphia. Now, the last one. Well, actually not the last one. This is the last serious one. And then we're going to talk about something else, because I just want to get something out off my chest. So the last one was the primary elections just happened, y'all. We just had the primaries April 23rd. And I don't think I've really talked to you guys since then. And a lot has happened. So first and foremost, a previous guest on the show, Mr. Andre Carroll, is officially the Democratic nominee for the 201st State House Legislative District. He is officially the second openly gay LGBTQ candidate to potentially be serving the State House in Pennsylvania. Historic. And we're so proud of Andre, and knew it was going to happen, because he was working, he was fighting, and it was amazing. Now to the bullshit. We had a very, very spicy attorney general's race. And instead of Pennsylvania getting to do what they needed to do and make the ticket a lot more black, I don't know a better way to say this, a lot more diverse, a lot more exciting, and they could have picked their first black woman in Keira Bradford Gray, but instead picked another white man just to throw on the ballot. And then Democrats are going to get mad while we can't get people to vote for 3 old white men and Malcolm. Like, come on now. And that's not, maybe not the fault of that candidate, Keira Bradford Gray. That's not the fault of the voters. That is the fault of the people who could have spent more time supporting Keira to make sure that we can make sure the Democratic Party shows out. Because if you can, that one thing that the Democratic Party is going to get excited for is a black lady. They love black ladies, right? So we lost that opportunity. And now our Attorney General's Democratic nominee is Eugene D. Pasquella. And it's just like, okay, another white man. We're going to vote for him. And I implore that you vote for him too, because we got to just vote them down the ballot, because, a lot of things are on the line. But at the end of the day, we had a real opportunity to have a really diverse and amazing ballot. And we really lost that in this Attorney General's race. What else is weird? Oh my goodness gracious. And then the 200 and I don't even remember the 200th legislative district, the colors race. So I never talked about the colors race before, and I'm going to explain in a minute why they call it the colors race. We didn't talk about this before, right? Because I don't really care about this. Some random state rep, whatever, right? But this time around, we had Representative incumbent Amon Brown. We had Miss Blackwell, aka Miss Purple, and then we also had Cass Green, and that's why they call it the colors race. We got brown, green, and purple, right? Last time around, 2 years ago, we had this similar matchup. And of course, Amon was the incumbent. So Amon won, right? He won. This time around, we had a similar result. But this time around, this was crazy. On election night, that race was not decided because there was a gap of 50 some odd votes. I'm talking about 5-0. So when the numbers are that close, members or candidates are allowed to call for a challenge or a recount. So Cass's team, Working Families Party, of course, asked for a recount. And days later, Amon was still declared the winner by 50 freaking votes. 50 votes! Then that tells you a lot, right? That tells you, number one and first and foremost, that your vote matters. If you ever want to be like, oh, my vote matters, don't say that to Cass Green. Because Cass Green will look at you and be like, well, if you one of the 50 motherfuckers that didn't vote for me, I don't got no rap for you, right? So your vote matters, especially when it comes to local elections. Number two, not having money is not all it takes. I'm going to say that again. Having money is not all it takes to win votes. What are you saying to people? What is the message? Who are you putting out on the street? Who is the messenger? And I think that is some of the gaps that you see with these campaigns, because Cass's campaign was heavily funded this time around, right? People always assume progressives come with no money. Not these progressives. These progressives got bread, right? And Miss Cass Green was funded. She had money, she had body, she had support. But again, money don't make smart decisions. And you could be the most well-resourced candidate, but if you are not putting those resources where they belong or where they need to be, you end up 50 points behind somebody else. The race is crazy. And that seat has always been cursed. Just Google that seat. I'm not even going to get into it, but just Google all the foolishness that ever happened with anybody that was a representative for this district. They always got into some foolishness. So yes, like I said, City of Philadelphia has been going through a week. Just a week. And I think I wanted to just really focus in on that. I'm going to link some articles to talk about the things that I was talking about, from the budget to the school board, and of course some of the election results as well. And the last thing I kind of want to rant about a little bit, and I hope this comes through clear because I'm recording in a really different way right now because technology is hating on your girl right now. Beefs. If I had the sound effect thing right now, I'll put it right there, like bum, 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 beefs. And here's my thing, right? I'm not about to go here and break down all these beefs. And I don't want to go back and forth. I think in the past, I talked a little bit about Nicki Minaj and Meg Thee Stallion beef because I love Meg. And at one point, I called myself a barb. But I want to talk about the beef culture, right? And I was having a conversation today, and I've been having conversations with people about these beefs, but particularly the one right now between Drake and Kendrick, and just really like trying to understand like how people are falling on sides and how people are really trying to say who's the winner and who's losing. And I think that, stan culture, and if you don't know what stan culture means, that means like if you're a member of the Riri Navy, if you're a member of the Beehive, if you're a barb, like that means you're a stan. That means your favorite can do no wrong, right? So stan culture has killed the rap beef. I'm going to say it one more time. Stan culture has killed the rap beef, and maybe sprinkle on some social media too. Because people can no longer be biased, right? And then you have individuals who are likely, giving really deep analysis to the beef, right? They're looking at the lyrics. They're pulling the receipts. They're pulling up the old shit. But you have stans that are feeding the airwaves and feeding the Instagram and the TikToks, so that way we're not able to get an unbiased, true understanding of what is happening in this rap beef, who's really winning, who's actually spitting some shit, and who's just pulling things out of their butt, or who is just really getting propped up because they have a troop of people who would do anything that they say. Now, I can't deny and say that if Beyonce got into a beef with somebody, I wouldn't be on Twitter like, that hoe eats babies, right? I can't deny that. Probably from my stand account, not from the real account, but my stand account, likely, right? But at the end of the day, that I understand my bias. And there are so many other people like that. I actually saw one of my friends post the other day on their story. Evan, shout out to Evan Burton. He put on there, it took me years to figure out that Drake fans are male barbs. And my mind was like, just straight up exploded. So, and a lot of people were wondering like, oh, am I going to do a recap about, how the beef started and who went where? But it's like, how can you even do that? There are so many lines, but then there's also so many lies that is kind of coming out from this that you don't even know what to prop up. All I know is that the smartest man in America right now, his name is J. Cole. Shout out to J. Cole. J. Cole is the only winner of this beef, and you know why. So yes, that's what let's get into it. I just wanted to rant a little bit. I know it's been a little while, but we're going to get into a really awesome, amazing unabridged journey for this week after a quick commercial break. Are you looking for cool, unique pieces to add to your wardrobe? Are you looking to support Black businesses? Or are you just looking for cool ways to represent your culture and your history? Then visit Kingston Couture for all your custom apparel and accessory needs. You can visit Kingston Couture on Instagram at KINGSTONKOUTOURE. Now let's get back to Unabridged. welcome to this week's episode of Unabridged and this week's episode of the Unabridged Journey. I am like so excited for this week's episode because not only is my guest an amazing friend who I've actually known for so long now at this
Yeah.
point, she is an incredible expert on a topic that we have not yet talked about on Unabridged yet, and that is sex. And I am super, super excited because
Hey.
Danielle is probably the best person to not only have this type of position because of her vibe, but she also has built this incredible platform that has been able to help so many people. So we're going to dive into that this episode. And I'm so happy to welcome to the show Danielle Simpson Baker. Welcome to the journey.
Hey, thank you for having me, friend.
Of course, of course. I'm
Yes.
so I'm so excited for you to be here. And I want to kind of give this background, right? Because like I think the main reason why I wanted you to be on the show is because I feel like you have been unspookable about your goal to be a sex therapist.
Yeah.
Like I remember we were freshmen in
hmm
the all girls dorm at HWS, illegally drinking in our
I know.
talking about what we wanted to do. And you said,
Uh-huh.
like, I want to be a sex therapist. And I was like, get out there. Like, and I had never heard anybody say that. And like, it was just so like, you were just like, that's what I'm going to do. And like, you have
That's
literally
funny.
built that out. And like, I never forget that. Like, I can still picture it. And that's why I like to see where you are now, to see what you have built. I love that so much. And that's why I want you to be a part of the Unabridged journey, because that is Unabridged. So thank you so
Uh-huh.
much for joining today.
No problem. And it's funny that you say that because when we were freshmen, I was a French major. So it's funny. And I was a French major for like 2 years before I switched to psychology. So it's funny that I was saying that like before I even switched to psychology. That's so funny.
You know, I was very surprised. But I loved it though. And I was like, that just
hmm
makes so much sense for you. Like just for
That's
who
so
you
funny.
are. Like that makes so
Yeah.
much sense. So like let's get into some of like the background for the girl that you don't know. So,
Yeah.
tell us about your journey to actually get to where you are.
Sure. Okay. So where I am now, I'm a registered marriage and family therapy intern here in the state of Florida, which basically means that I am a provisionally licensed marriage and family therapist. There's a whole process that you have to go through to become fully licensed. I'm on the tail end of that process. I should be fully licensed by like June or July. That's the plan. But I'm also a board certified sexologist. And the way that I got to that. Oof. So yeah, like you said, I've been wanting to be a sex therapist for the past like what 10-ish years now. Um, and I think I had like musings of the idea of like sex therapy, but when we were still like freshmen and sophomore, I wasn't really sure like how I was gonna go about that. And it was actually an experience during my freshman or sophomore year. Trigger warning, sexual assault. But I had a pretty shitty experience where I was drinking too much and I ended up being assaulted and on campus actually at Hobart. And I was already like having drinking problems, which I don't know if that ever really like came up in our talks, but like I had some problems in college. And like the deans already knew, like I had already gone to the hospital however many times because of drinking. So that was the last time, and it was kind of like the final straw for the dean, I think. And
Mhm.
he was like, all right, well, you either have to go to therapy or, we're gonna suspend you or whatever the case was. Because I was a liability at that point. But I think he offered therapy because he knew that I had also like been assaulted that night. I went to the hospital the same night that I was assaulted. So he was like, okay, something's going on here. So going through that therapy process and kind of like looking into like my own sexual healing, I really started getting more into the idea of sex therapy. And that's when I switched from French to psychology. That's also around when I transferred from Hobart down here to UCF. And then I kind of like streamlined my college, undergrad, post-grad experience to becoming a sex therapist, basically. So switched to psychology, got my bachelor's, started like volunteering here and there with like different conferences and stuff around the idea of like marriage and family therapy, sex therapy. Um, and then ended up going to grad school for my master's in marriage and family and couples therapy. And I knew that with that, that was going to be like a stepping stone to the sex therapy piece. So as I'm going through grad school, again, from the first day, I was like, well, yeah, I'm here to become a sex therapist. So still was like looking for opportunities to just dive into that realm. And then one day, it must have been my second year of grad school. I had this idea like in the middle of the night. I was definitely smoking, but I had this idea that I was like, I want a place to just talk about sex and weed without it being like, without like with it being a judgment free platform, a judgment free like zone or whatever. So that's how I came up with the idea of starting an Instagram page. And then from there I was like playing with names or whatever and finally came up with the Sex Pot Therapist. I think I came up with Dr. Sexpot, but that was taken. I think that was like the name of like a burlesque dancer
That
somewhere in
does not
Germany.
surprise me at all. Like
No,
every name is taken for everything at this point. Yeah, I
honestly,
realized that trying to start a podcast. Like there is no names untaken.
honestly, I was surprised. I was
Right.
really surprised. And so this was like 5, 6 years ago now. And I just thought I had like the most clever idea, Dr. Sexpot, but yeah, it was taken. So then that's when I settled on the Sexpot Therapist. And I started the Instagram page. I came up with like a few pieces of content, but I really just wanted a place to talk about the benefits of combining sex and cannabis from like a therapeutic standpoint. And then yeah, kind of just took off. Rest is history. So I've been able to do like workshops and stuff because of that. A lot of like freelance sex education. I've been like a guest lecturer at a couple different colleges. I've published some research on the topic of sex and cannabis, which I'm really proud of, in a journal of sexual medicine. Um, I got into a lot of like advocacy, especially around like some cannabis, but also really around that sex work because that's also something that I have some experience in. So from there, kind of just took off, and now my platform is where it is.
Yes, it is definitely taken off, and it makes sense, right? Because clearly,
Mhm.
like when I'm preparing for interviews, I am digging through because, like, I have followed your journey thanks to Instagram. I think Instagram has eliminated that old school high school thing where it's like, girl, I haven't seen you in years. It's like, no, Instagram makes me know what you have been doing with your
Mhm.
life. So I've
Mhm.
definitely been following that journey. But as I prepare for today's episode, I started looking more into some of your content, some of the blog
Mhm.
posts that you've written, and I feel
Mhm.
like you have just a very succinct way of just talking about sex. And I think that it's very easy to understand and it's very digestible for folks. So I'm curious, like who is your audience when you're writing? Like when you're I feel like whenever you're creating anything like and you're putting it out to the world, unless you're journaling, right? You're kind of thinking of giving it to somebody. So who is
Mhm.
that audience? Like who is that audience for you when you're writing these posts or creating these fun memes? Like who do you imagine being like, oh, this makes sense.
That's a good question. Really, it's anyone who is interested in sex education but didn't really get it growing up and who want it to be kind of like you said, like accessible and digestible and like no BS and like the stuff that people are thinking but don't really have a space to say it or don't really um like have people around them who are saying these things. So people who want raw, unedited sex education, kind of quick and dirty and easy, and that they don't have to like go through all these hoops to get it because sex ed in our society is severely lacking on multiple levels. And I think a lot of people, well, I mean, most people in our society, I think, have been done a disservice when it comes to sex education. So my audience is really anyone who wants to fill that gap for themselves and who wants to learn a little bit more about sex and cannabis.
No, I definitely would agree. I think that I've always had a very unique educational experience, and I had a
Mhm.
really down as health teacher, and she really
Lucky.
got into the weeds of it, right? So like I feel like
Mhm.
I was very blessed. Like shout out to Miss Martin. Like
Right.
she would even show us little weird ass videos. She would be like, "What are your questions, girls?" And the girls would be like, "Well, why
Mhm.
do people like anal?" And she'd be like, "Well, a man," and she would just give it to you. So like I feel like
I
I
love
was
that.
lucky to have that when I was like 16
Yeah.
years old, but I know a lot of people don't have that experience. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, is there a particular aspect of like just the combination of sex and weed education that is the reason why you made this your passion? And I know you talked about your experience at Hobart, which I think that type of experience could change a lot of things for you in that
Mhm.
space, but there also are positive aspects of the things that we do, right? I think about
Yeah.
my relationship to government, right? And the reason why I
Mhm.
work in government is because of disenfranchised communities, and that is
Yeah,
like
sure.
straight up because of the BS that I've seen growing up. But
Mhm.
I also see government as, and this is something that I learned in school, and one of the things that made me kind of go more into this was that we give up parts of our rights or our ability for freedom to
Mhm.
have protections or to have contracts, or you know what I mean, like that is the idea. So like they kind of, the idea of government, or whatever people like to say in this like big grand idea, is that we do it to take care of one another, right? And that's the part that I loved about it. It was like we
Mhm.
do this because we want to take care of one another. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious, like, what is that aspect of like not just sex therapy, but the combination of sex therapy education that makes you just be like, that's my shit. Like,
So going back to your question about like sex and cannabis in particular, it's funny that you use the word freedom because I did notice that, at least for myself, like when I consume prior to having sex or whatever, I do feel a little bit more free and a little more like able to settle into my body and like really be able to take in what's happening and all the sensations and all like those yummy parts and all the pleasure and everything. Like I feel I've noticed that when I like smoke a little or like have some like maybe like a little bit of tincture or something like that, it allows me to really take in the experience a little bit more because cannabis enhances our sensations from the inside out. So it only makes sense that with sex, it would be the same thing. Now, that's not to say that it can't go the other way. Like some people do experience a little bit more anxiety or a little bit more paranoia, but you have to kind of like know yourself and know your limits. And also, like, not everything is for everybody. But that was the biggest thing that I noticed about myself. And I was like, I can't be the only one who feels like this. And when it comes to like the sexual trauma, so there is a school of thought that supports like cannabis being used for like trauma therapy. And I did notice that like for my own therapy, sometimes if I smoked a little bit before I went to my session, I was able to talk about these things a little bit easier. And I didn't like clam up as much. I didn't feel as like judged about it. So a little bit of freedom, a little bit of just like wanting to share my own experiences with people and also let people know like, hey, you're not the only one who likes to, toke and poke.
that's gonna be one of the hashtags for the episode. Hashtag Toke and Poke.
See, and I've been using that one since I started my page. I was like, this is so clever. Like I feel like no one ever really appreciated it, but whatever, it's fine.
No, I love a good little like you always need a little one liner, you know,
I
like
know,
I
right?
think that
Exactly.
on the you can put that on a shirt, like
I
Toke and
could
Poke.
have.
Yeah, I
I
love
should have, but no.
that. So I'm like I'm super curious. So like you so like mental health right now has become a very much like a topic for the girls, right? Like I feel like,
Mhm,
they got all the apps now and everybody
mhm,
got the websites. Here's how you find your black ones, your Spanish ones, your gay ones. Like everybody
mhm,
is in the mental health space. And I
mhm,
think, looking at your website, the girls are on a wait list period. So is it
mhm.
the same way for sex therapy? Because I'm curious, like, are people getting open to sex therapy in the same way that mental health is kind of just like taken over? And I'm curious, like, have you seen that development in the same way that we've kind of seen this focus of mental health over the last few years?
Definitely. So I started my page like 5 years ago, and definitely since then, there's been an influx of like sex positivity online, more and more people getting into like just the field of sexology or sex therapy, either as coaches or educators or therapists. So it's definitely like a booming field with sex therapy in particular. So I think it kind of like mirrors what's been happening with mental health in general, just like what we've been seeing, especially online. Now, for me though, the reason I am in a waitlist period right now is because I work a 9 to 5 on top of having my own private practice. So I'm just trying to avoid being burnt out. That's why we're there right now. But yes, I do think there's been an influx of information about sex therapy, sex education, and I think more people are realizing they're not getting that information where they're supposed to be, which is in schools. So they kind of have to go elsewhere and seek out that information for themselves. And a lot of that information is online. So, yeah.
Yeah, and online can be very scary and misleading if you just start
Mhm.
Googling things and like
Right,
Google
right,
starts auto-filling for you and you're like, well, maybe this is the way it's supposed to go. Like,
right, right.
mm,
And on top of that, a lot of people, oh, from what I've noticed, a lot of people learn about sex either from their piss poor sex ed programs or from their friends or their peers. And usually their friends or their peers or themselves, they're learning what they know about sex from porn, if not from their sex ed classes. And nothing's wrong with porn, love porn, but it's not supposed to be purely educational. And I think a lot of people, especially a lot of like cishet men, take what they see in porn and they apply it to sex in real life. And then they get kind of confused when their partner is like, wait a minute, what the fuck are you doing? Like, no, you actually can't choke me or slap me or whatever without asking. So I think that's another reason why the internet can be, it can be a blessing and a curse in that way. And you do kind of have to know like where to look for like sex education and not just like porn for education purposes. But that's another reason why I'm happy with where sex education and sex therapy is going online.
I appreciate that. And I think, I would hope that this education and positivity would lead to a lot more positive experiences for women in
Mhm,
particular. And not even just like
mhm,
in our regular sex practices, but I think that in like thinking about, some like even dire situations, right? Like if a man knew how to talk about his sexuality and why his urges are to be with women in this way, it's like maybe, we'll find our way out of women not being afraid to walk home alone in certain parts,
right.
right? Like that's how I
Exactly.
think
Yep.
that's how we have culture shifts. And I think like
Right.
when I think society does not put enough emphasis on the way that we view sex and how it really skews our society, right?
Mhm,
Like some of our most progressive nations have gotten to that point because they changed the way they look at sex, right? Or
right.
they changed the way they view women, or they changed the
Mhm,
way they allow sex work to go. And that has
mhm,
changed the way you have, sexism in the workplace and systematic levels of sexism because we talk about it in a way more open way versus some of the taboo that we face here in
mhm,
America, right? And I think
right.
that is the reason why you have like these crazy repressed men a lot of the
Mhm,
times, not to stereotype, but we know the numbers, girl. Like
right.
that is a lot of the reason why because they don't have that education or even just that language to talk about what they're feeling.
Right, right, or exactly. Emotional intelligence is not really encouraged in men. I think things are changing, but I do think that maybe, like you said, maybe rape culture wouldn't be as big of a thing if we socialize men a little differently. And if we really did look at like the belief systems that a lot of men inherit, like the fact that they're entitled to something or because they were told no, that that means that they can act a certain way. Well, maybe if they knew how to, number one, process their emotions differently, and maybe if we kind of attacked those really shitty belief systems that is perpetuated in a patriarchal society, I genuinely believe that we wouldn't have as much of an issue with rape culture as we do.
No, that's real. I think the porn comment
Mhm.
is real too. I've like I appreciate a good porn sometimes, but sometimes I get in my head and I'm just like, I don't know what this girl got going on. Like I don't know what this
Right.
girl has. I hope she's okay in the background.
And we have to remember, like, those are contrived situations. Hopefully, a consensually contrived situation that has stuff happening behind the scenes that we aren't seeing. Like, there are cuts in between the scenes where they're, maybe feeling a little bit awkward or having to, like, reset something, having to fluff a little bit. Like, it's what we see on our screens is missing like the whole picture of what's happening. And people see that and think that their sex is supposed to look like that, and it gets people fucked up. Not all the time, but
Especially for girls,
sometimes.
especially for sometimes for the girls. Like, well, I think sometimes for
Mhm.
like ladies, it'll be very educational, like, in terms
Mhm.
of like it's
Sometimes,
like
yeah.
it's like I'm like, okay, this is what their low key little expectations are, but here we go. We're going to have a
Mhm.
discussion, meet in the middle.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing, like it can be somewhat educational. You can take a couple little nuggets from there, but you also do have to have a conversation about what you're trying to bring from your screen into your bedroom.
Well, that's real. So I one of the things that I pulled from some of my research that I loved was that pleasure is a fundamental part of our well-being. And I think
Mhm.
that like that's such a strong statement to make and to be kind of putting out into the world, especially as a black woman, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of our space and value in society is always yucked up to our like grit and our ability to be
Mhm.
like, I can just take this and not really wrapped in owning our pleasure. So can you talk more
100%.
about that, especially, being a black woman in this space?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we weren't put here to just work and die. Capitalism is obviously fucked for multiple fucking reasons. But the fact that we live in a society where we kind of like attribute our self-value to like how much we produce or like how productive we are, the work that we do. We live in a society of like grinding all the time. And you have to earn a break. You have to earn um a good feeling. You have to work for that, right? And like obviously we all have to make a living, so like yes, that's how our society is, but that's not why we were all put here. I believe that pleasure is our birthright. We aren't here to just suffer. We're supposed to have moments or experiences that make us feel good and make us feel whole, and not just sexually either. I mean, like having a good meal, that can be pleasurable. Going outside in the sun or seeing your friends or your family, that can be pleasurable. But even those things, we have to kind of like fit that into our busy schedule, which sucks. So I genuinely do believe that, again, like pleasure is something that we're kind of entitled to, but we aren't taught that. So most people don't really think about it in that sense. And especially being a Black woman, like in this space of like sexual liberation, if you want to call it that, our ancestors especially did not have a chance to even think about pleasure. Like from the time that we were brought over here, what do we have to do? We had to take care of some kids that we didn't want to take care of. We had to be out in the fields. We had to watch our family members be, brutalized in front of our eyes. Like just think of all the shit that your mother's mother had to go through. Pleasure was not really in the framework of that. So especially, being where I am now, like I'm very much trying to reclaim that. And I do think that like we need to have more conversations about it because again, like especially being Black in this country, we really, really have to work. We really don't get the chance to like think about where pleasure fits into our day to day unless we kind of like proactively take that back. So, yeah.
No, you really gotta like claim that. And I think that goes back to like what we were talking about at the top, like before we got into this episode, because like it's us like having to relearn that, we could have fun and really enjoy our lives again. And I think
Yeah.
that is so like effed up, right? That
Hmm.
is like so ingrained in us. And I'm curious, and the weird thing is I haven't had any white people on my show yet, but I'm curious if this is something that like if they go through that as well, or if other races go through as well, where they have to have this idea that you deserve goodness or you deserve this in your life, because I feel like that is a very, very Black experience I've always seen, and I'm just curious about what that looks like outside of our culture. But
Yeah.
that's real, and I think when you're I feel like our millennial space, right? Like us, and now that we're in our 30s, like I feel like all of us, like we were saying before, are going through this transition of being like, we don't have to work just to be good enough, right? And I feel
Mhm.
like that is our balance of being like halfway into, the generation before us and halfway into being Gen Z, where we're just
Mhm.
like, actually, we're going to work hard, but we're going to work hard when we want to work hard, right? And it's
Exactly.
not like F everybody, I'm going to never come into work, or it's not
Mhm.
like I'm going to work until I die. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's why I love being in this space because, we are exploring that for ourselves and also like really setting a path in that. And I'm just like, that's fine by me. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
still getting my stuff done, but also taking care of myself.
Exactly. I'm so good at self-care these days. One thing about me, I am using my PTO. I do not care. I will call out if I need to call out. No offense to any of my clients, love y'all, but if I need a day, I'm gonna take a day. Like last weekend, I went out of town to St. Pete, which is like 2 hours from here, a little beach town, and I'm going back next weekend because I loved it so much because it felt good. So
What
yeah,
is some
very
of what
good.
is some of your other self-care?
Going for walks a lot lately. And also I've been trying to like just do more things in my community. So I recently tapped into Orlando's like medical cannabis community, which is crazy to say because I've been living here for so long, but I've been busy and really have not had the time. But I've been doing more just like activities out in the community. Like this Saturday, I'm going to a spliff and stretch class, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, it sounds really cool. A couple weeks ago, I went to a cushion cocktails like mix learn how to like mix your own drinks class, infuse drinks. Um, so yeah, sometimes just going to the beach, which is only like an hour away. Sometimes just taking myself out on like a tourist date in the city of Orlando. I did that a couple weeks ago. Museums, lots of museums,
I
sleeping.
love that. I love like outside activities. I'm not really
Mm.
like a bar girly like that, but I'm down
Yes,
for
no.
an activity. You want to go paint some pots? Let's go paint some
Right.
freaking pots. Like that is
Exactly.
definitely my
Exactly.
level. Like I want to do some activities. Like I did an improv class like a couple weeks ago and had an amazing
Oh,
time.
cool.
Like yeah, so
That
we
sounds
are
fun.
like trying new activities. I love that for us.
Exactly.
I saw this young lady on TikTok and her thing is like every black girl needs to have like 80 hobbies. And she is like zip lining and doing pottery and all stuff like that. I'm like, I just need to can I get three? Like if I had three,
I
I'll be
know, exactly. Three
like
solid
that
ones,
is a
I'm
lot.
good. Yeah.
Like I still gotta go to
It's
sleep and
funny.
all that stuff like that too.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
that's what, but like I'm one of those people where I turn my hobbies into things that become work, and that's what podcasts became for me because like I love
Yeah.
podcasts so much, and I'm like I need to make my own now. So here
Hmm.
we are. But I'm calling this the money
I
making one.
feel
So
it.
that's fine.
Love that. Yes. Yes.
So I'm curious. So like we also want to make this a little educational. So if somebody was like interested or
Mm.
didn't really know where to start on this journey, but wanted to get like they know that they needed something, how would you like what would be your advice for them?
Getting started on the journey of like sexual wellness, pleasure, exploration, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That is a good question. First, I would maybe suggest like take an inventory of like what you already know about sex and pleasure and like what it means for you. And then maybe come up with like a list of questions that you still have. And then from there, probably gonna have to do a little bit of research like on Instagram, social media, like find the people who are talking about these things. You can use me as a resource, Sex Pot Therapist. I follow and repost a lot of resources on my page because I know that people come to me like to be connected to other people in the field. I would also encourage some kind of self-exploration, whether that is pleasure mapping, which is literally kind of just like getting in a comfortable position, laying down, and kind of just like from head to toe, explore different parts of your body and the sensations that you get from it, and kind of take a mental note or write it down of the spots on your body that bring you the most pleasure. Now, that doesn't have to mean like masturbating or anything like that, but if you want it to be, it totally can be. But I think it's important to learn what your turn-ons are and try and get comfortable in that, especially if you have to like communicate that to someone else or um, if like if it's just like something that you haven't really explored before. I think that's a good place to start with like kind of owning your own sexuality and like what pleasure means for you. I also recommend maybe consulting with a sex therapist or educator, maybe taking a couple classes if that's something that you want to do, looking into different kinds of like different like books on pleasure and like sex education, that kind of a thing. But I think self-exploration, really asking yourself like, what do I want to know? What questions do I still have? And doing some research to answer those for yourself.
I love that. I think that, getting back to you is a good start in this, right? And I think that's
Mhm.
also like such an amazing segment to which is I told you this is gonna go by quickly. We've been talking for almost 30 minutes now.
Mhm.
But it's a
I,
perfect
I
segue.
didn't even think so. That's funny.
Right? That's what I said. I looked up. I was like, dang, okay. So that's a lot. But it's a good segue into the question I asked all the girlies, which is, the name of the show is called Unabridged, right? And that means to be
Mhm.
your whole unedited self, right? So what does that
Mhm.
mean to you?
Mm. It's a good question, Dom. What does that mean to me? Lately, I think it means honoring my needs in each moment and not like pushing myself too hard. Because if I'm being honest, over the past couple of years, I think I did push myself too hard, especially with like social media and like feeling that pressure to always be creating and everything. And it's crazy because I remember like 2 years ago, I was thinking like, damn, I've been going at this like pretty hard for the past like 3 years. How have I not like hit a wall yet? Like, am I gonna burn out? Is that ever gonna happen? And I was like, yeah, I must like, it hasn't happened yet. I must be fine. And then like a year or so later, it happened. And I got like super burnt out and kind of just like really fell back from my page, which I hate to say. But it's the truth. I felt really burnt out on it and it was kind of like a chore and I just didn't want to do it. So I feel like the fact I didn't listen to myself, um, probably got me a little messed up there. So now being my unabridged self means making sure that I'm checking in with myself and honoring the times where I'm like, okay, Danielle, you got to take a break and not pushing myself too far because when I do push myself too far, I get sad and then I don't do anything and I stay in my room all day. So I'm just trying to honor that and find a balance between creating and honoring the fact that I need to sit down sometimes.
Especially with your work, like who wants to have a sad sex therapist? Like you gotta
I
have
know.
time is about vibes.
I know. Yeah. But
Doing it
I'm coming out of it.
like, okay, let's talk about your Gucci. Oh, like nobody, nobody wants to talk about sad sex therapist. I
I
need my
know.
therapist to take care of herself, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is
Yep.
so
It's
real.
it's it's a slippery slope. Yeah.
Especially because you want to be so helpful, and as you start to like meet more people, you just like, I have to like keep track or keep supporting this audience. Like people are depend on me now, and so funny. I have that conversation with one of my other friends who has a pretty large following like yourself, and it's based around like self love. And he actually on the show too for Pop Pop Johnson. Alex, he talks about the same thing where like it was a lot of pressure for him at the same time, but he knew that audience was depending on him, right? And like he knew
Mhm.
that that connection was there. So I can only imagine, like what that is like for you with this topic that is very like niche, but also like something that everybody can get into because weed
Right.
is everywhere now. It's illegal in all the states. It's about to happen in Pennsylvania. Well, when legal is legal, when weed is legal in Pennsylvania, like
Yeah.
we're
Domino
in
effect.
another space.
Yeah. Yeah. The fact that Florida has recreational coming up, I was kind of shocked. But yeah, it's happening. And and the fact everybody is interested in sex at some point. We're all here because of sex. Like everyone has questions about it. So
We
yeah.
all do it, right? So like let's just
Exactly.
I wish we were like in European countries where everybody was just
I
free about
know.
it. Like,
I
you can
know.
figure out, who cares? Like
Right? But then I might not have a page, so.
No, they probably would appreciate it. Like, especially
Yeah,
with
I guess. But I feel like
with
it
the weed
came out of
combination.
like, say that again.
Especially with the combination of like the pot. Like I think that that's still always gonna be like the thing.
Very true, very true. But I feel like I came up with my page like a little bit out of like that place of like people here don't really have a lot of sex education. Maybe over there I might not have felt that way because like it's not as repressed, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But
Like some of your tips are like some of your graphics are so helpful. It'll be like, here's how you can dirty talk. And I'll be like, I never thought. But like that's something that somebody probably would freak out about, or like an
Mhm.
episode of Sex in the City that I've seen one time where like they like, oh my God, he talks dirty. I don't know how to do it. That's like an
Mhm.
experience that we all kind of go through, like these little things. But it's like, how do we feel comfortable, or who do we feel comfortable if we don't even have like maybe those girlfriends that we feel comfortable
Right,
having sex with? Like
right.
we have that and feel comfortable so we can actually explore something that is a right to a right to us. So
Exactly. They
doing
don't
the
teach
Lord's
you
work
about
out
that in
here.
school.
Doing the Lord's work out here.
I try.
So is there anything else that you want to share with the people of the unabridged audience, maybe about anything you're working on, or even just like, like what is the message that you want to put out there?
Uh, I mean, I feel like I said pretty much everything. Something that else that comes to mind, sex work is work, in case anybody was wondering. Um, Follow me on Instagram at the Sox Pot Therapist. There's nothing I'm really like working on right now. I have been working on a book chapter for a textbook coming out for sex educators. So I'm pretty excited about that. It'll be on the topic of sex work. So yeah, look out for that soon. More details about it on my page though, at the Sox Pot Therapist.
That's amazing. The girls are published authors. Like, I am so proud of you. We're in Essence and all that. Like, yes, that is
you.
amazing. So
Thank
I will,
you.
of course, as always, for all my guests, I will put Danielle's links and fun stuff in the show notes. Make sure to check out her amazing page if you haven't already when I posted the promo. But Danielle, thank you so much. Not just for being on the show, but what you are doing for the people. Maybe just people of Florida, but if you do virtual, the people of the world, you know. I definitely appreciate this, and this dialogue has been so informational. And thank you so much, Boo. I always appreciate you.
No problem, love. Thank you for having me. This was so beautiful that we got to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. And that has been this week's Unabridged Journey. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
And that has been Unabridged. Thank you so much for joining the journey. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch the show. Also, check out our website. That's unabrdgpodcast.com. We'll see you in 2 weeks.